What's up guys, welcome back. This is Anime Fiction. You'll be watching What If Naruto Fused with the Mind Stone in Marvel, Part 5. Now, let's begin. Naruto's perspective. That was as much a surprise for me as it was for everyone else. I had previously identified him and Hank Pym while searching for potential recruits, allies, and adversaries. However, from a purely logical standpoint, his significance was rather minimal. Not to the same extent as the Pym particles were. Not like I hated the dude or anything, none of that, but he wasn't actually a priority I needed to keep an eye on. The sole reason I monitored him was to stay informed in case rumors began circulating about a purported Ant-Man, allowing me to be aware of his emergence. Following Scott's departure, Banner regained consciousness and regarded me with disapproval, assuring me that he would never consent to a sparring match with me while he maintained control. Davis, known for his exuberant personality, was quite pleased with the potential he saw following my fight against Banner. However, it was only after I clarified the necessity for supervision during his transformation that he tempered his enthusiasm. I considered creating an emotional inhibitor for Banner. However, I ultimately chose not to pursue this idea. I believed it would not benefit him, as my intention was for him to seek a symbiotic relationship with the Hulk. Further suppressing his other half would not serve anyone's interests. It was amusing to observe that I was no longer the sole recipient of Laura's intense stares, as she identified a second target in Banner. However, unlike her approach with me, she chose not to engage with him for some reason. At this moment, I find myself in Dr. Hank Pym's residence alongside Pietro and Laura, who graciously accepted my invitation after a light-hearted request. Her mother was rightfully anxious, but I assured how we were doing nothing dangerous and just paying a visit before she finally calmed down, before entering the geek zone with the now sober Banner, who she instantly recognized. Cozy home you have here, Dr. Pym. I opted for my human appearance this time, as I believed it would foster greater receptiveness. Appearance does matter, you know. Seated opposite me was the experienced Hank Pym, accompanied by his daughter, Hope, and the newly appointed Ant-Man positioned behind him. Well, it used to be a lot cozier. He let out a dismissive snort. I don't know if that was a jab directed at me or someone else, but I wasn't commenting on it. I believe introductions are in order. I am Naruto, and these individuals are Pietro and Laura. I introduced myself along with the two young individuals accompanying me. Both his and Rose's eyes drifted to Laura before a frown marred their faces. You taken children now? I found amusement in their reaction as both flinched when Laura displayed her claws and growled at them. She's had a troubled past, and as you just figured out, she doesn't like being called a child. I said and tapped Laura's shoulders to make her stop, which she did and retracted her claws. An individual with unique genetic variations. I chose not to respond to the question as I found no justification to do so. I observed Pietro as he scanned the surroundings until our eyes met, at which point he simply shrugged. I will conduct a thorough examination. I expressed my frustration as he exited the house to wander the neighborhood in search of a distraction for a brief moment before the conversation took a more serious turn. What brings you here today? I do not recall any instance of the Avengers conducting an interrogation of civilians. Hank Pym remarked as he settled into his chair, observing the tension in Rose and Scott. I can assure you, there is nothing of that nature. I'm only here to ascertain the veracity of your prog's words. Hope expressed her disdain under her breath, indicating that her feelings towards Scott remained quite negative at this moment. I don't believe the Avengers have it in them to perform corporate espionage. He let out a dry chuckle. I find it hard to believe that your intentions are purely altruistic. That is not the case at all. They all seemed surprised at my quick admittance, but I just continued on. The reason for my presence is that, prior to your recent break-in, Darren Cross, your previous prog, disclosed that he had discovered a method to revolutionize the arms market, surpassing even Stark's achievements. Naturally, this piqued my interest. Although this information has only reached a limited audience, I have my methods for navigating such matters. I don't consider myself a genius in many things, but the timing of his heist on our base and the news does put a lot of things in question. What are your expectations from us? This time, it was Hope who inquired. There is not much to report, along with your father's support. Are you indicating that you do not intend to provide assistance? Would you like my assistance? She became quiet and turned her gaze toward her father, who wore a troubled expression, while Scott appeared bewildered. Hank held a strong disdain for Stark, S.H.I.E.L.D., and all associated individuals because of their previous betrayal. However, that was not the focus of my discussion. I've scanned all the digital files in this house and not one of them contained his formula, which meant it was all on his head. I was not particularly eager to acquire the Pym particle at any cost, as I could easily do so without their awareness. However, my objective was to establish a connection with them, even if it ultimately holds little significance, which I suspect it will. The father and daughter team were pioneers in quantum research and related fields. "What do you want from me?" Hank Pym inquired. "As I mentioned, there isn't anything significant to report. Your expertise will be invaluable should I need your assistance. However, until that time, I will manage independently. I am here to understand the current situation from your perspective." It was not entirely a falsehood, but it also did not represent the complete truth. "Is this an enterprise? What contributes to the crankiness and self-importance often observed in older men?" I have clearly communicated that I do not require anything significant from him, yet he continues to inquire. "I'm not giving you my research if that's what you're after." I scoffed at his words. I don't need the Pym particles to crack nanotechnology. Vibranium was already coming a long way there. This metal is rightly regarded as the most versatile on Earth. The uses were just too many that not even I had figured out all of them. Rest assured, if I had any intentions of taking advantage of your lives' work, I would have already done so. However, you have yet to provide a clear rationale for your presence. Haven't I? My rationale for being here is unequivocal. They appeared uncertain, so I provided additional clarification for their comprehension. "Would you like assistance from me?" I anticipated that, eventually, something significant was going to occur, and given that this was Marvel, it was clear that it would happen every Tuesday. As much as Hank Pym didn't trust me, he actually relented to accept my help just when Darren Cross arrived at his house. It was amusing to observe them holding their breaths throughout Darren Cross' visit, and they were incredulous when he failed to acknowledge their presence. With a subtle adjustment of the lighting, the man perceived himself to be in the company of Hank Pym and a neighbor who had joined for the baseball game. I sensed his desire to eliminate Hank Pym in that moment, but a subtle suggestion from me was sufficient to dissuade him from proceeding with that intention. I put the thought that it'll be much better if Hank Pym lives to see everything he's ever cherished be completely taken by Cross and then die. Typically, I would have completed this task, but the decision was ultimately Hank's to determine. He still intended to pursue the strategy of corporate sabotage and have Scott acquire the yellow jacket, but I found it somewhat uninteresting, so I opted to introduce a bit of excitement. Wouldn't it be better for him to lose everything he's ever worked for on the day he thought he'd finally make it to the top of the world? The database of Cross Technologies became accessible to me in just a few minutes. The document contained numerous unauthorized protocols that the individual had employed in his pursuit to refine his own interpretation of the Pym particles. The database of Cross Technologies was highly secured due to the significant number of cyber attacks they experienced daily. Had I attempted to hack it, they would undoubtedly have been alerted. However, I partitioned a portion of my mind into a few kilobytes of data and integrated myself into their internet connection. From there, I downloaded a larger segment of my consciousness, sufficient for the task, into their software as cache data, proceeding without hindrance. "What is our plan for proceeding with this?" An overly enthusiastic Scott inquired. "I will ensure your discreet entry, and your sole responsibility will be to extract the yellow jacket promptly. Pietro will evacuate the civilians should a confrontation occur." I articulate my thoughts while gradually sipping the tea that the elderly gentleman had kindly prepared for me. I successfully identified the range of frequencies utilized in the control of the ants. However, I was unable to determine how these frequencies were intricately combined to create an imperial language that the ants could not refuse. I will resolve it shortly, although it did not capture my interest. "What will your plans entail?" Hope inquired with a noticeable sense of doubt. "Is it me?" I indicated myself and then shrugged. I assured Laura's mother that she will not be engaging in any fighting, so I will be taking on the babysitting responsibilities. Rest assured, I have comprehensive surveillance of the entire building. Nothing will go unnoticed as long as I am monitoring the situation. Having observed my prior presentation, she likely refrained from arguing too much as she needed to attend to some important guests and potential clients. Let's efficiently resolve this matter so that everyone can leave early. Hank expressed his frustration quietly, muttering unintelligible words, while Scott appeared highly energized. I noticed Laura's eagerness increasing, but I simply shook my head at her, dampening any excitement she might have had. It was somewhat bothersome to me how much she appeared to enjoy fighting, although in reality, she did not. It resembled her botus instinctive response to any apparent conflict. I aimed for her to assert control over her primal instincts. Logan experienced similar challenges alongside his brother, Victor Creed, which contributed to their formidable reputation as a fierce duo in their youth. Their desire for combat was a significant factor in their decision to engage in the World War. It only got better for Logan after he had his adamantium implant, which dulled his animalistic side quite a bit, but not completely. I received a status update request from Steve while en route to Cross Technologies, to which I responded to inform him of the forthcoming developments. "What is the process for gaining entry?" Scott inquired as we arrived at the large building. "We will proceed with ease." They were all taken aback, and before either Hank or Hope could express their concerns, I had already entered the building after passing through security with Laura without setting off any alarms. "Initiate action," I said, and made my way towards the room for the secret presentation. The Yellow Jacket presentation appeared to be familiar only to a select few, indicating that the majority of attendees were present for the introduction of other projects completed by his group. "Could you please explain how you accomplished that?" As Laura and I walked calmly behind Darren Cross, I could hear Hope's voice in my head. He was engaged in conversation with several key figures, and some of their identities were notably intriguing. "I hacked into your company's systems. That's also how I included both mine, Loris, and Pietro's invitation in their registry," I responded calmly as we entered the dimly lit room just before Cross began his presentation. I must acknowledge that the individual demonstrated a strong sense of aesthetics, as the design of the Yellow Jacket was visually appealing. At a certain point in the midst of Cross' presentation, I realized that I was under observation, which should not have been feasible given that, aside from not presenting my true human visage, I was situated in a psychic zone that reduced any precognitive awareness directed towards me or the surrounding area. It caused individuals to inadvertently overlook my presence, allowing me to seamlessly integrate into the background. The sole circumstance under which an individual could gaze at me with such intensity would be if they possessed immunity to this degree of telepathy. I discreetly noted the number of individuals present, utilizing my telepathic abilities, and observed that the one who was observing me appeared notably more subdued than the others in the vicinity. I reviewed the footage from the cameras and observed that it was a middle-aged man. Upon reviewing the registry of this event, I discovered that the individual was identified as Jonathan Drain, with no available records. Most likely a fake identity. I redirected my focus to Darren Cross, who was on the verge of witnessing the theft of his life's work right before him and his prospective buyers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Yellow Jacket." The toy-sized yellow armed suit was revealed while inside a reinforced glass tube that was protected by lasers blocking the only open vent that was connected to it. I knew he was hoping Scott Lang was trying to steal it and had already taken countermeasures to make sure that the smaller man couldn't escape. Under the astonished gaze of all present, including Darren Cross, an object resembling a fly struck the suit, causing it to descend the tube from which it had emerged. Darren swiftly pressed a few buttons, a small smile forming on his face as he awaited the return of the Ant-Man suit from the now sealed tube. The audience settled as Darren appeared to have a grasp of the situation. However, after a few moments, the atmosphere shifted to one of discomfort. The man began to breathe heavily, his complexion pale, as he anxiously tapped on the tablet in his hands. No, this is not occurring," he spoke to himself in a disorganized manner, which confirmed to the audience that a significant issue had occurred. Although some individuals missed the occurrence due to its rapid nature, those with sharper vision observed the small, man-like shadow that seized the Yellow Jacket under the microscope. As they prepared to depart, Darren drew a firearm and aimed it at his former mentor, Hank Pym. "It was you, correct? He remains within the premises, and there is no possibility for him to evade capture." I observed Laura, who attentively monitored the situation with keen eyes and a composed demeanor. She looked ready for an assault if anything attacked. "It got boring pretty quick, right?" "Affirmative," she stated clearly. She was indeed someone who spoke sparingly. It was expected that the first individual to discreetly exit the room would be Jonathan Drain, which naturally captured my complete attention. "Shall we proceed to depart?" I gently pulled Laura, and we exited the room. Prior to our departure, I transmitted a telepathic signal that incapacitated all of Darren's cognitive functions, rendering him unconscious along with everyone else present, with the exception of the astonished Hank Pym. While I didn't have any need for entertaining this as long as I did, I can't deny that I also got something from it. All data related to the yellow jacket has been successfully downloaded. Notice initial scan of the shrinking particles formula used for the yellow jacket shows slight miscalculations in respect to its effect on biological neurons. It was an imperfect iteration of the original Pym particles, so it is not surprising that it was lacking. Darren Cross is set to confront a profoundly challenging day as he faces the prospect of a life sentence in prison. If any of his contacts attempt to assist him, there will always be consequences to consider. I have completed my collaboration with Hank, and it will now be their decision, whether it be Hank or Scott, to determine if they wish to engage my services moving forward. I can even throw a freebie after fully understanding how the Pym particles work and tackle quantum diving just for the sake of it. It is my pleasure to meet you, Mr. Drain. The individual in question seemed startled as Laura and I unexpectedly emerged while he was attempting to enter his vehicle and depart quickly. Could you please introduce yourself? Oh, he was good, definitely good, with the way he totally acted as if this was his first time seeing me, as if he had not been paying the most attention to me throughout the duration of the presentation. I apologize for my oversight. My name is Naruto. I would prefer to address you as Mr. Drain, however, it is apparent that the name is not genuine. He became quiet as he regarded both Laura and me, the earlier pretense in his eyes replaced by a noticeable seriousness. What is it that you require from me? He inquired. I observed Laura and shook my head, noting her relaxation upon realizing that the opposing party no longer seemed hostile. If not for the time I dedicated to emulating Natasha precisely, I too would have remained unaware of the false pretense implied by his posture. Nothing much, I assure you. I gestured with my hands casually to indicate the minimal significance of my inquiry. I just want to know who you are affiliated with. His expression contorted in perplexity upon hearing my inquiry. I am unable to comprehend. Pardon. It appears you possess unique abilities, do you not? I would like to inquire about your current association. As soon as I spoke those words, he swiftly retaliated by attempting a roundhouse kick aimed at my head, taking advantage of our proximity. To his surprise, the kick halted mere centimeters from my face, prompting Laura to spring into action, though I intervened before she could proceed. It is not acceptable for you to engage in conflict while I am present, young lady. Not when I promised your mother you won't. What is happening? His eyes widened in surprise as he observed that, but he promptly retracted his legs upon realizing that he could pull them back but not extend them forward. Could you please introduce yourself? His eyes betrayed the wariness he felt, and I could feel his apprehension rolling out in waves as he looked at me and Laura again, eyes widening a bit in recognition as he saw the two-bladed claws slowly retracting back into the latter's hands. Like I said, my name is Naruto. It appears that you have yet to share your name with me. The police were en route to apprehend Darren Cross, and I could sense his anxiety escalating as the sirens intensified. I apologize, but I am unable to disclose that information. He said. Not even a fake name. Will that be effective? I chuckled and shook my head lightly. That is not the case. Laura observed the two of us with a look of confusion, noting the civility of our conversation despite his attempts to confront me. Well, if you won't give me your name then I can't push it, but I'm afraid you'll have to tell me why you were there, and trying to steal Darren Cross research files too. That certainly elicited a more significant response from him. I encountered a bug while examining the company's servers. Without giving it much thought, I integrated it and continued with my tasks. It wasn't until he exited the presentation room that I detected a signal emanating from his pockets, prompting me to follow him. Not to mention that I had a few hunches of who he might really be, but I couldn't be sure unless he admitted it. I found it amusing as he assumed a fighting stance once more. However, considering the proximity of the police, I opted to conclude the matter swiftly. The alarm in his eyes widened as he realized that all his movements were constrained. Before he could react, my hand settled on his chest, and utilizing the Mind Stone, I intended to dismantle his psychic barrier, but instead, I inadvertently shattered another layer or illusion. The suit he wore and his skin shifted in a rhythmic manner, revealing before me a blue-skinned woman with striking red hair and yellow eyes. Raven Darkholm. I quietly spoke to myself, which she overheard, prompting her to react more aggressively. It wasn't the revelation of her identity that upset her, but rather the mention of her name. This reaction was somewhat understandable, as only a handful of individuals were aware of her, and even fewer knew her true name. This appears to be the conclusion of unexpected developments for today. Raven, known as Mystique, regarded the men who had inexplicably nullified her shape-shifting ability with a single touch, a sense of apprehension settling within her. "I want to make it clear that I have the option to pursue legal action for sexual assault," she remarked with a light laugh at the perplexed expression he wore, which gradually transformed into a serious acknowledgement. "Is this considered your unclothed form?" Naruto found himself perplexed, as this matter had sparked considerable interest among the general populace in his previous world. Raven, however, found herself somewhat uncertain about how to respond to such a sincere inquiry, yet she proceeded to provide an answer regardless. "Affirmative." "Oh." Naruto gradually withdrew his hands, and with that, their light-hearted exchange came to an end, restoring the atmosphere to its earlier seriousness. "Ms. Raven, if you are present, may I assume it was at Magneto's direction?" She was uncertain of the reasons behind her feelings, unsure if it stemmed from the unfamiliar powers he wielded, but everything about the individual identifying as Naruto instilled a sense of instinctual unease within her. She responded to his question with a firm shake of her head, "No. He is unaware of my presence." She was uncertain about her reasons for responding to him, yet she did so nonetheless. He was quite intimidating. She was uncertain how he had acquired knowledge of her and Magneto, but she was not particularly concerned with that. Her primary focus was on finding a way to escape. In Naruto's thoughts, he was analyzing potential scenarios and events regarding the possibility of apprehending Raven at this moment. He was certain that Magneto would be compelled to take action if that situation arose, and given the current circumstances, a mutant's act of terrorism was the least desirable outcome for anyone, except perhaps the government. Raven regarded him with astonishment as she sensed the grip he had on her loosen, granting her the opportunity to escape. However, she was astute enough to recognize that her freedom was contingent upon his willingness to allow it. "What is the reason for this?" Despite the ambiguity, both parties comprehended her inquiry. "It is quite straightforward. It appears that you have maintained a discreet presence for several years based on my understanding. And I believe no one wants a mutant scuffle when the government is against you now more than they've ever been." Her form transformed into that of a middle-aged woman with blonde hair dressed in a suit, and as soon as this change occurred, he conducted a scan of her current appearance and successfully received a ping this time. "Bayville High, is it?" This persona of hers served as a principal at Bayville High, which, interestingly, was the same institution attended by the students from Xavier's. "Is this one of those instances where she acted independently, or does she continue to align herself with Eric? Are you implying that you oppose the Accords?" she asked. "Indeed, that is correct. Let us proceed, Laura." He addressed the girl who had been quietly by his side the entire time, and at that moment, a boy suddenly appeared beside him in a gust of wind, catching Raven off guard once more. The three of them vanished before her eyes, leaving her even more astonished as she struggled to comprehend the nature of Naruto's ability. Naruto POV. I maintained confidentiality regarding the meeting with Mystique, as it was unnecessary for others to be informed. There was truly no purpose to it. The sole motivation for my pursuit was to ascertain the individuals involved. Had it not been for the minor setback encountered while attempting to read her mind, I would have seamlessly infiltrated her thoughts and departed without incident. I anticipated that either Scott or Hank would contact me shortly, so there was no necessity for me to remain or inform them of my departure. Right now, I was about to do something I'd been putting off because of the Accords, and since it was already underway, I pretty much knew those who were for it or not and those still on the bench. Davis was accompanied by Banner and Sarah, the pair conducting tests on him following his agreement to their requests, while the only others present with me were Wanda and Laura. Both for reasons known only to them. "Could you please share what you are currently engaged in?" Wanda inquired upon observing me generate holograms of the Avengers and analyzing their specifications. "Working on outfitting the team," I stated as I retrieved the schematics for the first individual, Natasha. The costume for Black Widow was quite straightforward and visually appealing. The initial focus was a comprehensive vibranium overhaul. Fortunately, a significant quantity of vibranium was recovered from Ultron's Meteor City, providing ample resources for my project. Additionally, the considerable amount of raw adamantium ore obtained from the facility made it straightforward to equip everyone, including Stark. I was fortunate that Stark possessed the necessary competence and reliability in technology, as the entire compound was equipped with such resources. This eliminated the need for me to design and construct a 3D printer or a weaver for the material I was working with. Am I included as well? she inquired upon reviewing the specifications of her profile. And you have accurately recorded my measurements. I paused briefly before maintaining my pace and responded, yes. Text if you would like to know, I am aware of the measurements of each member of the Avengers. She grinned and just nodded to herself, focusing her attention to the detailed parts of her data. Do you have any ideas for me? She inquired. I finally directed my gaze towards her, and then at the image before providing my response. Red complements you well, so we will maintain the same color scheme. No additional requirements for defense or offense are necessary, so the majority of elements remain unchanged. It appears that you and Banner are receiving the least amount of upgrades. In fact, Banner is not receiving any upgrades at all, as he possesses optimal defense. Your concerns are primarily aesthetic. What about me? We both looked at Laura, who was unable to find her profile among the others. Do you wish to engage in a confrontation? I inquired despite being aware of the answer, and as I anticipated, she nodded in agreement. This is a brainstorming session. What upgrades are you considering? Xavier's school for gifted youngsters. Upon the return of the team members from their reconnaissance mission, Xavier convened them in his office to communicate the recent alterations in the government hierarchy. So they were defeated by a robot. Isn't that amusing? Logan laughed heartily, resulting in him choking on his beer. Regardless, we now have clarity on the position the Avengers are most likely to take. Charles contributed. Aurora turned to Charles and inquired, should we engage in a discussion with them? Her inquiry stemmed from her deep understanding, surpassing even Charles, of the consequences that would unfold once the laws were disclosed to the public. Charles fell silent, and the others followed suit, recognizing the gravity of the situation that was more serious than they were willing to acknowledge. What can you tell me about this Naruto character? The Avengers may not align with the Accords, yet it is clear that they cannot overtly challenge the government. That individuals' actions are likely to have negative consequences in the future. Those old fucks can be pretty tenacious when they want to be. Logan expressed his irritation clearly in his voice. Yes. What about the Fantastic Four? Hank made a timely interjection. When evaluating groups, the Fantastic Four consistently stood apart as they were the sole team with a formal agreement with the government, regardless of the implications of that arrangement. Charles declined with a shake of his head. I'm uncertain. There appeared to be an obstruction affecting the psychic energy within the room, likely attributed to Reed Richards, however. Is it Naruto? Hank observed Charles' hesitation with keen interest. There was something unusual about him the first time I saw him on television. It was likely a combination of instinctual reactions that piqued my curiosity about him. He is designed to be a self-evolving android, correct? Charles tapped his temple as he recalled the sensations he experienced in the presence of Naruto. It resembled an endless abyss poised to engulf all existence or anything that ventures too near. That does not appear to be very user-friendly. Scott quipped. Ha, no kidding, kid. I don't think we need to worry that much since he's with the Avengers. Need I remind you what Chuck said when he first tried gauging the Hulk? Or Thor? Logan concluded. Charles responded with a sheepish laugh when Logan highlighted one of his shortcomings. He did not judge individuals based on their appearances or emotions, but rather on their actions. Otherwise, he would not have shown concern for people like Kurt, who had a demonic appearance, and Logan, who was simply a ruthless killer in human form. However, it is essential to recognize that initial impressions hold significant weight when establishing a connection with someone. Are we in communication with them or not? Aurora inquired once more. Colossus then asked, do we really need to? Hank provided a response prior to Charles having the opportunity to speak. No, we do not. Continuing to proceed independently will likely have consequences sooner than anticipated. We are subject to the decisions of the government, and if they adopt a hostile stance, any form of resistance on our part may be classified as terrorism. It is quite complex, politics, that is. He expressed his irritation, a sentiment reflected by the others. Naruto's perspective acquiring the new outfits for Natasha, Wanda, and Barton was straightforward, and my ability to manage all the machinery here significantly expedited the process compared to handling it concurrently. It was somewhat amusing yet slightly embarrassing for me to endure the teasing remarks and innuendos from Wanda regarding my awareness of her proportions and bust size, which I had previously learned had increased, thus contributing to her amusement. It is truly encouraging to observe her emerging from her shell and articulating her thoughts once more, free from the burdens of her past. This approach ensured that the impending threat posed by the Scarlet Witch was being mitigated, preventing her from annihilating all mutant life across the multiverse. At this moment, I am finalizing Laura's design, which features an all-black leather suit equipped with retractable protrusions for her claws. The suit served as a medium for echolocation, leveraging its vibranium properties to enhance her senses significantly. The applications of vibranium are virtually limitless. For Steve, the suit had a darker shade like the one in the Infinity War movie with all the goodies that came with it and more. Utilizing his inherent strength and the expertly crafted lining composed of a blend of adamantium and a touch of vibranium for enhanced flexibility, the suit elevates his physical capabilities significantly, allowing him to perform at a level reminiscent of a mini-Hulk. His shield received a minor enhancement in addition to the modifications made by Stark, allowing it to return even when lodged in place. I incorporated a photon casing that enhanced its charge, and with a powerful throw, it transformed from a frisbee into a cleaver. A photoadamantium cleaver. Noise. During this process, I successfully deciphered the Pym particles, which I accomplished with relative ease, if I may add. The integration of that accessory into the suit, designed for maximum adaptability to be incorporated into a piece of jewelry or a keychain, was the standout feature of my recent assignment. The Falcon underwent a comprehensive transformation, requiring a complete rebuild from the ground up. The result is a streamlined red and white jacket that incorporates all the essential components of his suit. The overall mass was significantly minimized, and upon retraction, the wings had the capability to slice through reinforced carbine glass, provided sufficient force was applied and the adamantium components were utilized for the wings, primarily along the outer edge. Additionally, he could opt to slightly dull the edges to enhance his flying performance. As the pilot, he will be able to navigate the controls effectively. An explosion has just occurred at Oscorp. Several individuals of interest are presently in the vicinity of the explosion. Oh, would you look at that? Issues with goblins. This time, I proceeded to Oscorp alone, ensuring I remained unnoticed as I sought to uncover the situation and contemplate my next steps. I had no problem with killing anyone, thanks to my thought processes, but am I okay with just killing everyone I call a villain? It is clear that Norman Osborn is facing a terminal condition, without question. He may be entitled to various considerations, but continued existence is not among them. His actions were undeniably malevolent. What I was thinking of was if it was alright to kill every bad guy I come across. Which option is preferable, logic or morality? Prior to all of this, I was simply Naruto Uzumaki. Previously, I experienced both strengths and weaknesses. However, following my encounter with one of the 6 relics of universal creation, my perspective has significantly shifted. The changes are appreciated. However, I often find myself conflicted between implementing my changes decisively, irrespective of the potential repercussions, or taking a more measured approach, making subtle adjustments while remaining aware of the outcomes. At times, I find it necessary to be conscious of the changes I implement. While it is acceptable to leave my imprint as I navigate through life, there is a persistent thought reminding me to allow others to experience their lives without my interference. Despite possessing the quickest intellect on the planet, I find myself unable to overcome the challenges of an existential crisis. I made a light-hearted remark as I arrived on the rooftop of the emerging conglomerate in the research and energy sector Oscorp. It was quite funny looking at Peter Parker frantically looking around, trying to find a way to ditch and switch uniforms, but the Goblin held everyone hostage so he couldn't make any movements and risk the lives of his classmates and other civilians in the building. It appears that Spider-Man will not be making an appearance in the near future, and the police are unable to intervene, as doing so would likely lead to dire consequences. Given my invisibility to all but spectral senses, I was able to proceed without any obstacles. Unlike the former Naruto, or the Naruto that would have been, I wasn't one to fancy superhero costumes, so I just changed my outfit to a black and red iconic checkered shirt with white fur collars and jean pants. The most relaxed ensemble one can acquire. Please proceed along the designated path, and you will be fine. The room became completely quiet as I began guiding the previously restrained, now liberated, hostages through the barrier-like passage I had created with hard light. May I inquire as to your identity? The astonished goblin inquired with disbelief, observing my sudden appearance and the construction of a road in the center of his corporate building's floor. I disregarded him and focused on ensuring that the crowd did not trample one another, and only after that did I redirect my attention to the goblin. You. "Are you Naruto?" As his glider came to life, I stifled a chuckle, observing how effortlessly it fell under my control while the goblin remained completely unaware. "I appreciate your understanding." I refrained from inquiring about how he recognized me, as several individuals were already aware of my human appearance following the meeting. He emitted the distinctive laugh he was recognized for and ascended gracefully with his glider. I was anticipating the spider's arrival, however. Since he will not be joining us, I will take my leave for another occasion. As he recognized that his getaway ride was unresponsive to his commands, a sense of panic began to set in. Keep in mind my previous comments regarding logic and morality. At times, one may find that neither is necessary. Adopting a mindset of detachment can reveal the minimal significance of many concerns. I extended my hands towards him and drew him closer, only to have my hand ensnared by webs, courtesy of a spider suspended upside down from the ceiling. "I apologize, but it seemed to me that you were on the verge of causing him harm." He offered an apology prior to leaping down, landing forcefully on the glider and rendering it inoperable while securing the goblin to the wall. "If it isn't the bothersome issue." Unfortunately, you arrived after the conclusion of the event. This situation has quickly become frustrating, though it won't assist the gnome facing imminent demise. Whether it's bias or not, this individual consistently frustrated me whenever I encountered him as the antagonist in a Spider-Man comic. He was the inaugural villain for whom I hoped the hero would deliver justice, closely followed by the Joker. The web that enveloped my hand disintegrated, after which I proceeded towards the goblin, disregarding the young hero calling my name from behind. I'm not really sure how the spider sense works, but it must have tipped Peter off about what I was about to do. He jumped into action to try and stop me, but ended up getting himself stuck in a wall instead. Even with all his yelling, I made my way to Norman Osborn and just gave his chest a couple of taps, which ended up rupturing his heart. It was a quiet end for the goblin, and honestly, he didn't deserve that kind of peace. "What made you do that? Why did you do that to him?" Peter was screaming, tears streaming down his face, and it was clear he already knew who the goblin was. I thought about saying something to comfort him in that moment, but then I remembered how many people he's killed in just the past year since he started. It really drained all the sympathy I had for him. "Hey, Peter Parker, this isn't just a game for kids." I walked out of the building, and not a single camera caught my face. It's funny to think that even the folks I helped might struggle to picture what I actually look like. I could sense Peter's pain, but I wasn't about to get involved in it. He was aware of who Norman was. He thought about the kind of freak his so-called best friend Dad was, and he decided that he would only go after him as Spider-Man. The kid was one of the smartest people around, but he really only used that smarts for being Spider-Man. Everything seems fine, but sadly for our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the world is looking pretty bleak. Responsibility and self-interest sometimes get superimposed the deeper you go into this murky waters called heroics. Looking after the Green Goblin was something I really thought mattered. I really don't believe any villain has ever deserved to be hated as much as the Goblin was. Even when he was just a character in a book, he managed to give me the most unsettling feeling I've ever experienced from a comic panel. Honestly, Peter should be thanking me instead of giving me that angry look. I just rescued him from a lifetime of suffering. I'm not sure if he really knew the Goblin's secret identity or if he just had a hunch, but honestly, it didn't make a difference. What really stood out was that he had the power but kept holding back when he really shouldn't have. I really don't think we should just go around taking out every so-called villain we meet. It really depends on how they affect the world around them, you know. The actions of some people are just unjustifiable, and it's better for everyone if those people are retired permanently, in the ground most preferably. The Avengers will always be one of the reasons why they're my favorite groups in this universe. When it really matters, you can count on them to get the job done. You know, a big part of why the X-Men faced so many struggles in this universe for such a long time is that they often made some questionable choices. Take those mid-level villains, for example. Instead of taking them out when they had the chance, they decided to lock them up. It seems like a missed opportunity, especially for those who just keep choosing chaos and destruction every time. It's pretty obvious that high-level threats don't come around often, and while low-level ones are pretty common every day, it's really those mid-level threats that stir up most of the chaos, about 80 of it, to be exact. And that's exactly where they placed the Goblin. Peter Parker really represents what it means to be a true hero, but that very quality also led to a lot of suffering for him and, in turn, for his city as well. Do you honestly believe that anyone, except maybe J. Jameson, would actually blame Spider-Man for Goblin's death? I don't really hate Peter for his actions or lack thereof. In fact, I actually respect his character to some extent. But that doesn't mean I can just sit back and let everything fall apart, especially when it involves someone I really can't stand. At this moment, I'm just floating above the clouds, taking in the city below as it goes about its own rhythm. I attempted to extend my awareness to all the technology within a 5-kilometer radius from where I was, and honestly, the sheer number of crimes occurring every second in this city was just astonishing. My mind raced through all the chaos: armed robbery, breaking and entering, rape, drug deals, assassination, and a whole bunch of other criminal activities. It was overwhelming to process everything in just a few seconds. How can we really put an end to crime and all the bad stuff in the world? It seems like the best way forward would be to evolve. Darwin's idea about survival of the fittest really nails it when it comes to achieving any goal you might have. It's important to keep in mind that not everyone fits this method, and if it's pushed too hard, the success rate for people will drop below 10 globally. Hey there. Just a quick note, this was Naruto's AI talking. In case you were curious. So, what's the exact method you're talking about? Global genocide. I didn't even raise an eyebrow at that because this was something I had thought about before while working through one of my logical reasoning exercises. Which phase of the Ultron protocols are we talking about? Alternative Phase 1 Ultron protocols. Oh, alternate, huh? I really can't see myself using that option anytime soon. I glanced down at the city again, and even though it was getting late, it was still alive and buzzing with activity. I sensed someone approaching and turned to see a familiar red hue, which instantly let me know who was on their way without me having to dig deeper. Wanda. Text, I shouted to her as she approached, gliding a few meters away with her red aura enveloping her. What's up, Naruto? Having a serene night out? She wore a simple white turtleneck sweater paired with dark blue jeans and gray sneakers, topped off with an overcoat to keep warm against the chilly evening winds. I'm considering starting a hobby, something I can enjoy in the evenings. I mentioned casually after noticing she was there. You look dressed for a stroll, a night's out for you. She laughed a bit as I whipped up a park bench for us to sit on, which really just meant I was using my telekinesis and some light tricks to make it look like a bench. We both sat in the sky and overlooked the city below us while having light conversations which were mostly centered around my need for a hobby. You know, since I don't really need sleep, I figured it'd be a lot more efficient to use that time for something productive. I mentioned it to her. One thing I liked about Wanda was that she was quick to understand something, or at least relates to it without ever having experienced it. She's always seen me as a different kind of human, ever since I was born or maybe reborn. Hey, do you have any ideas? She asked me after listening to what I had to say, a bit unsure. She shrugged when I shot her a glance that I thought was pretty subtle, but clearly, it wasn't because she noticed it right away. I usually don't have a lot going on during the day, unless we have a mission or something like that. Hey, if you ever feel like having some company or need a hand deciding on something. The last part remained unsaid by I knew what she was offering. Maybe it was my influence, but she seemed so much more vibrant and outgoing than I had imagined she would be back in her early days with the Avengers. Oh, I get it. Do you think you'll need a third-party opinion? I playfully teased her, even though I couldn't help but feel uneasy about the increasing number of crimes happening as the night grew darker. Wanda swung her legs, glancing down at the clouds drifting beneath us, a hint of a blush coloring her cheeks. I don't think so. She said before looking at me as she tucked some strands of her billowing hair behind her ear. It'll be just the two of us. I kept my thoughts to myself and shifted my attention to the city below, a move that didn't go unnoticed by Wanda. Is there anything that stands out to you? I nodded in response to her question. I got up from the bench and turned to Wanda, smiling at her. I'd love to take you up on that offer. But first, how about we tackle some cleaning together? She shrugged when she understood what I meant, then got up from the bench and instinctively dusted herself off. The night is still young, so why not give it a go? She said before abruptly dropping herself in a free fall towards the ground at neck-breaking speeds. Could you pull up my ability sheet for me? Your order has been confirmed. Flight. Molecular deconstruction phasing. Projecting energy. Absorbing energy. Immunity to psychic interference. So, technopathy, huh? Changing density. Manipulating electromagnetism. Manipulating hard light. So, telekinesis, huh? Mind reading. Changing forms. Quantum shifting. Change the shape. It was pretty extensive, and when looked at it from an objective standpoint, it wasn't hard to see that I was one hell of an overpowered dude with a good number of Omega-level abilities under my belt. I guess I should make the most of it. With nothing on my plate, I decided to take a plunge, trailing behind Wanda. I gave myself a little extra push to close the gap between us. Let's go, Dirk. A bunch of folks dashed through an underground parking garage, wearing ski masks and carrying duffel bags. Gunshots rang out from the floor above, followed by some pretty intense screams that eventually faded away. It sent chills down the spines of the 5 armed men as they hurried toward their getaway car. Hey, what's the deal with Trell and Killy? Are we really just going to leave them there? Seriously? One of them yelled as he jumped into the back seat, pulling his gun out the window to aim at anything that might come from behind while they sped away. Never mind. That witch. She must have them by now. So, you're not hearing those screams anymore, huh? They gone already. The driver yelled, clearly scared, as he slammed on the gas, trying to get them out of the danger zone. They had just barely made it, and he was pushing the limits to get them as far away as possible. As they drove in silence, one individual recognized an important fact that had been overlooked and felt compelled to articulate it aloud. What about the other individual? Which individual are you referring to? The individual accompanied by the witch. The individual possessing a luminous gem embedded in his forehead. A profound silence filled the car, only to be broken by a light-hearted chuckle. For the passengers, however, it felt like a harbinger of doom. I have a family, sir. Kindly proceed. The driver decelerated the vehicle until it came to a smooth stop, the scenery ahead evoking a profound sense of despair within him. The police station. There is no need for concern. I will not take any action against you. The voice conveyed a strangely comforting tone. I cannot extend the same sentiment towards your other associates. The police station was immediately on alert when an unidentified car parked in their lot and extremely armed individuals emerged with bags and guns. However, they were met with an unexpected turn of events as the supposed attackers promptly surrendered their weapons and the stolen money, even pleading with officers to send them to jail, tears streaming down their faces. Some individuals even grasped the legs of the officers who detained them, insisting that they be assured of receiving a prison sentence. Throughout that night, the NYPD encountered the most unusual apprehension in its history. No. Edward Buckman reacted with intense frustration, overturning the imported Italian table in his office upon witnessing the news of Norman Osborn's death for the first time. He reached into his inner pockets, retrieved a small phone, and dialed a number, awaiting the other party to answer the call with anticipation. The call was answered after several rings, and a brief silence ensued before a smooth and articulate voice emerged on the line. Edward, I am curious about the urgency that prompted you to call me before 9 a.m. While the language appeared courteous, Edward Buckman discerned the underlying sarcasm and derision woven into each carefully articulated phrase. He spoke curtly into the call, clearly not inclined towards casual conversation. Please refrain from expressing your sympathy, Shaw. I require your assistance. He spoke through clenched teeth, fully aware that this was a necessary course of action. Absolutely. How may I assist you? While they maintained a cordial relationship, the demands of their business often hindered the development of deeper interpersonal connections. Norman was to accept the invitation to the inner circle contingent upon the success of his research. However, it appears he not only perfected it but also succumbed to the allure of power, ultimately choosing to don a Halloween costume and engage in a spree of violence. Indeed, indeed. Quite an astonishing reveal if I do say so myself, but I fail to see where you are going with this. Shaw said over the phone, though he knew where Edward Buckman was going with this, something the latter knew too, but he knew Shaw just wanted to hear him say it. Indeed, he did. I was a significant supporter of Norman's research on the super soldier serum, and now that he has perfected it, I am interested in acquiring all the information he possesses regarding it. He subsequently articulated his request. The reason he selected Shaw from the entire group was that Shaw was the most dependable individual he was acquainted with. The individual possessed a remarkable ability to accomplish tasks with optimal efficiency. However, everything came at a cost. I will assess the situation and, in exchange, could you provide me with an update on Project Armageddon? I understand it's a significant factor in the game. This was precisely why soliciting a favor from Sebastian Shaw was an unwise decision. He resembled a cunning adversary, aware of your most intimate secrets, patiently waiting for a moment of oversight to seize the opportunity and strike. In an effort to maintain composure in Shaw's presence, Buckman took a deep breath and proceeded to request an accounting of Shaw's payment. Understood. If you can, help me find out who wrecked Ross Base and my research facility. He remained silent, ended the call, and then settled comfortably onto the couch. His mind couldn't help but go back to a call he received a few days ago. It is possible that he had ulterior motives. The truth remains uncertain. Training Ground D6, Avengers Compound. Banner, Sarah, and Naruto were supervising the training of the new recruits, with Banner and Sarah gathering data on the newly added mutants, while Naruto concentrated on the older members participating in a workout session. Are you sure he'll be able to phase? Banner inquired with uncertainty as he observed Pietro vibrating his hand and attempting to maneuver it through a 6-inch thick block. Without turning to acknowledge either Banner or Pietro's unsuccessful efforts, Naruto provided his response. Although speed is crucial, it constitutes only 37% of the overall process. Banner scoffed at that as he retrieved Pietro's speed data. Your math is not adding up. Indeed, Naruto acknowledged. We possess evidence of numerous technologies operating at frequencies beyond their typical capabilities. His cells simply require the reverberation momentum, and thereafter, the process will be straightforward. Pietro was still yet to vibrate through any since the first day Naruto brought it up, but the boy never stopped trying. Conversely, Wanda was engaged in a confrontation with the imposing figure of Davis, who was exerting considerable effort to overpower her. However, Wanda was skillfully maneuvering to evade any direct contact with him. An astute choice on her part. Across the training ground, Steve and Natasha engaged in a sparring match, their expressions reflecting a sense of nostalgia as they observed the impressive performances of the rest of the team from the corner of their eyes. Viewing it from this perspective truly reinforces the point, does it not? Natasha smiled before swiftly delivering a kick to Steve's ankles as he attempted to respond. Steve skillfully evaded the kick by raising his leg, maintaining a composed expression, as he anticipated this move from Natasha. Steve simply shook his head and responded. It is preferable in this manner. The world has become significantly more unusual since Loki created a breach in the sky. Merely being special is no longer sufficient. Furthermore, he skillfully intercepted her kick with both arms firmly positioned and seized it as she attempted to retract it, utilizing his considerable strength to execute a controlled maneuver that sent her over his shoulders to the ground. We require all available assistance. He offered assistance to help her up, which ultimately proved to be a miscalculation, as Natasha seized the moment to pull him down, ensnaring his head with her legs and securing his hands in a submission hold. Steve quickly yielded, tapping her leg for release. Steve sighed exasperatedly as he saw a smile on Natasha's face as she basically stole his win away from him. He observed the final session in the training hall, where Sam Wilson was instructing Laura on the fundamentals of close-quarters combat. Absolutely not. No claws. Sam admonished the young girl, who appeared visibly frustrated as she struggled to land a successful hit on him. The sole stipulation Naruto established for their confrontation was the exclusion of her claws, a straightforward limitation that ultimately proved to be far more challenging than she had anticipated. She inhaled deeply and charged at Sam once more, only to have her hand deflected. However, she utilized the momentum from her loss of balance to execute a spin and attempted to strike the side of his head with her legs from an elevated position, which the seasoned special agent evaded with precision. A commendable follow-up, however, it remains susceptible to interruptions. Keep in mind that a hit does not count as a strike until it makes contact. Sam provided guidance to Laura, who was engaged and attentive, demonstrating a high level of seriousness. Her inclusion in the team remained under probation, as the more experienced members were hesitant to permit a young individual to participate in their conflicts, despite any potential advantages they might bring to the team. Neither Steve nor Natasha were going to allow it had it not been the girl herself saying she wanted this. I want to kill all the bad guys. Those were her statements of justification after being inquired about her motivation to engage in combat. Steve had hesitated, but he finally relented on the matter when Naruto had said he'll look after the girl and supervise her training. Indeed, that is correct. Sam observed with an approving smile the effort and noticeable changes the girl was making over time. Increase the intensity of your strike, and given your smaller stature, it is essential to understand how to effectively leverage your height against your opponent. Naruto observed as the hall swiftly transformed into a lively atmosphere filled with sounds of excitement and enthusiasm as everyone became engaged in their activities. He seldom engaged in activities, as the majority of his skills could be acquired through running calculations and contemplating their applications. In relation to evaluating capabilities, he possessed two specific abilities that required practical assessment: quantum shifting and form shifting. The initial manifestation occurred after he integrated the Pym particles into his own physiology and subsequently altered a section of his tissue to form a sac capable of generating the necessary components of those particles, should he ever wish to extract them from his body. Another manifestation emerged following his administration of the Hulk serum, an occurrence he has yet to thoroughly investigate. Despite possessing the quantum shifting capability, he had never attempted to shrink down to subatomic levels, as he had not yet developed a method to safely traverse the quantum realm. He was unwilling to risk being trapped there for decades due to a minor miscalculation. After reflecting on his recent incident, he recognized that following the elimination of Norman Osborn, several prominent figures began to appear subtly, including a few with notorious reputations. However, Naruto had already devised plans for some of them and was patiently awaiting his opportunity to make an impact. Naruto POV: since that day, Wanda and I have made it a shared endeavor to explore the city's criminal underbelly at night and administer justice. It served as an engaging activity for us to pursue during that period while simultaneously addressing criminal activity. Efficient. It was pretty amusing how Wanda snagged a nickname after just one night out. The criminals referred to her as the witch, and honestly, that name wasn't too far from the truth. I was just the guy who followed the witch, the man. Honestly, it's a pretty basic name. I didn't really care about it that much. On another note, the team's reaction when I mentioned I had taken down the goblin was pretty underwhelming, to put it mildly. Yeah, the guy had a few billion to his name, but in the end, his greed for power really took over, and now he's one of the most disliked people around. I couldn't help but wonder how Harry would react to it. How would his life be? But then I remember that what happens is out of my hands now. Quite hypocritical, some might say, but it's the truth. What should I do? Should we make him an Avenger? No way. If he goes down the same path his father took, it'll be the same one to reunite him with his dad. Naruto, I need your help. Natasha called me over, so I put aside what I was doing, joining Banner and Sarah to turn Davis into our guinea pig, and headed over to her. I ran into her in what was turning into our conference room, just sifting through some data snippets. Do you need my help? She rolled her eyes at how I was talking, but I wasn't trying to be that way on purpose. Sometimes I find myself switching between a more sophisticated way of speaking and a casual one. There's a ton of data here, and I was just wondering if you could simplify it for me. At least she had the decency to look a little embarrassed by her request. I let out a sigh and casually waved my hand over the holograms, quickly copying, downloading, and checking out everything in an instant. Hey, just so you know, I'm not really the type to be a simple everything made easy guide, okay? Come on, don't be such a downer about it, and I promise I won't spill the beans about you and Wanda sneaking out at night for a little rendezvous. She said with a sly smirk, leaning against the wide oval table that doubled as a holoprojector. Text. I let out a sigh, knowing all too well how much she loved to tease. She definitely knew what Wanda and I were up to at night, and that didn't make things any easier. I let out a sigh, realizing that if I pushed back against her teasing and redirected her focus, I'd probably end up with the short end of the stick. What's going on with Norman's case? She nodded and said, but that's not all there is. I'm pretty sure about that. I managed to grab a few things, and I have to say, interesting. It's not shocking that Ross was involved in Osborn's pie, but it looks like they both had a familiar backer. It was the modern age, and a lot of things could be handled by proxy. That's exactly what those in charge did, which made it tricky for me to track down the main person behind all this. I pulled up the data I got from the facility where Laura was created and turned to Natasha. What do you see? She glanced at the data strings and the communication lines, then zeroed in on the essence of the 3 research projects. I could see the light of realization starting to shine in her eyes. All of them are based on the super soldier serum. Norman may have had some shortcomings, but it's all about human enhancement, and the way the other two experiments complement each other is just perfect. She said as she took another look at them and reached a likely conclusion. It's like two parts of a whole. I gave her a nod in response to what she said. Well, that's just how it is. Even though they're different, one's success will definitely help the other succeed too. Text looks like we've finally found our missing link. So, what's the connection? It's so much easier to find now that we've got a good trail. It's virtually impossible to fully hide one's actions in today's age. It's going to take a bit of computing time, but I'm confident I can figure out who's really behind all this. I've got a list of some bad guys who really fit the bill, but with this timeline being all over the place and my not-so-great grasp of everything Marvel, it looks like I have to take the long route. Natasha gave me a curious look and asked, "So, how are you planning to find the trail?" It's kind of amusing that she believes I'll find the trail, but hey, I'm not going to question it. You know what? I think it might be fun to make someone work for it. I have someone in mind who would be more than happy to help us track down the trail. Bayville High School. When someone is bored for too long, they might end up making a decision they normally wouldn't even think about. And that also goes for the guy with the biggest brainpower this side of the galaxy has ever seen, me. As I strolled through the empty halls of Bayville High, Wanda and Pietro were right there with me. I didn't say no to Laura's request to follow me because I didn't want to. It was actually because of Jean Grey, the telepath at this school. I really hope we don't end up in a situation where she catches on to any of her thoughts. The little girl knows who her biological father is, and that also means she's aware of the group he was involved with. Wanda and Pietro were almost untouchable when it came to mind reading at her level, unless something unexpected happens and she really lets loose. And let's not forget that I'm here too. We knocked on the door of Principal Darkholm and waited for a few seconds until we heard the go-ahead to come in. We've got some manners and stuff, after all. Raven's face when she saw us was completely hilarious, and I had the feeling that if she didn't already know a little about what I could do, she would have already gotten into a fighting stance or made a flight decision. "Wait, am I getting arrested?" she asked in such a calm voice that it really impressed me, especially since I could tell she wasn't faking it at all. This just reminded me of the kind of life she's experienced over the years. I couldn't help but chuckle as I settled into the seat in front of her, with Wanda and Pietro hanging out behind me. "I promise you, there's nothing like that. Ms. Raven, or do you like to go by Mystique?" I asked in the same calm way that she looked at us. I wore a black blazer suit with a gray shirt underneath, paired with some nicely cut trousers and matching shoes. Pietro wore a similar outfit but opted for a white shirt, while Wanda chose a dark red shirt featuring a black blood splatter design paired with jeans. Overall, we seemed pretty professional. I think I might have picked that up from Stark's setup of the Jarvis Matrix. Raven shook her head. "Raven is fine," she said, then glanced at Wanda and Pietro before finally meeting my gaze and continuing. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but if you're not here to catch me, then what brings you here?" I've begun. "It seems like we might have some different interests here." She let out a scoff at what I said and responded. "I always thought that heroes stayed away from doing business with the villains. That's why they always seem to be at each other's throats. I think that before any groups start fighting, they should really try to understand each other. If they can't find common ground, then maybe it's time to consider other options," I said. "And I believe there's a chance for understanding between us, which entirely depends on you." I went ahead and added it. That seemed to have gotten her hooked, as I could practically feel her rising interest despite the unchanged genial smile on her face. "Huh. So, what exactly is this conflicting interest you're talking about? Just like you mentioned, it would be great if we could reach an understanding." She leaned in just a bit, a relaxed move that also caused her clothes to hug her figure, making her curves quite noticeable. Damn, she's good. Sadly, there's just no way something like this could ever backfire on me. "So, I actually live right next door to the Black Widow." I just nodded with my biggest, most graceful smile, almost as if I didn't notice her totally natural actions. "All right then." I snapped my hands and the windows in the room closed and the curtains rolled over, blocking any outward source of light. The lights went down, and just as Raven started to feel a bit anxious, everything burst into life with holographic images. "What do you think would be the best way for us to work together, Ms. Raven?" "Hey everyone. Just a quick note before the comments start rolling in about Naruto being a villain. I want to make it clear that Naruto isn't going to turn into a villain or stick around in the anti-hero zone for long. So, why did I end up meeting Raven of all people to uncover the mastermind behind those illegal experiments when I could have just spent the day getting it done myself? It could be seen as me feeding my ego, or maybe I was just being kind and trying to make someone feel important. Honestly, whatever it was, the truth is that this is just a little experiment for me. I'm not some genius or secret leader, I just figure things out as I move along. And honestly, it's not like Raven was an unredeemable villain or anything, not that I'm trying to defend her or anything like that. What's going on here? Raven asked, getting up from her chair to take a closer look at what was spread out across the room. I'm not really sure why we need her help. Wanda leaned in and whispered to me while Raven stood there, completely captivated by what she was seeing, the documents I had shared, which only revealed the smallest details of what truly mattered. So, basically, it's a bait. It's called resourcing, Wanda. She just laughed off what I said, barely giving it a second thought. Raven looked at me and said, "What are you hoping to get from me by showing this?" An in text. I believe you can uncover who's really behind all of this, and once you do, I'm here to back you up in taking them down. Can you help me get them out? Why do you presume I'd want them dead or even meddle with them? She asked, clearly a bit skeptical. It's all about the power that comes from getting rid of them. I've picked up a thing or two about you, Ms. Raven, and just like any ambitious person, it seems you have a thirst for power. This really gives you some genuine power, you know. I mentioned. She dismissed my comments, yet it was evident that she was reflecting on my words thoughtfully. What are your true aspirations beyond simply having someone in that role? I responded to her question with a casual shrug. It is important to acknowledge that it will significantly assist in achieving your goals, while also enabling me to manage certain negative aspects more effectively. That doesn't sound too heroic. She commented, eliciting a laugh from Pietro, who had been behaving unusually since our arrival. I also dismissed her comments, as I am not engaged in any inappropriate or questionable activities. My actions were likely to provide her with greater advantages than they would for me. While I don't wish to come across as overly confident, the likelihood of her declining was quite low. Ultimately, who would refuse an exceptional opportunity to join the inner circle of the Hellfire Club? What would happen if I were to betray you? She unexpectedly inquired. I found it amusing that someone I regard as intelligent would make such a poor insinuation. I think you're mistaken about something, Ms. Raven. I am not in any way going to condone any illegal activities or acts of terrorism from you or any of your future associates. This proposal is intended solely to secure a more promising future. One of the best things about having unlimited access to the internet is having access to most books, besides an unending stream of motivational quotes, is the freedom to learn up on a lot of subjects. Including lesser-known works such as Sun Tzu's Art of War, as well as fundamental psychological texts. Merely possessing scientific intelligence would not suffice when engaging with the general populace, let alone those with exceptional qualities. I was well aware of the methods to catch elusive individuals like Raven off guard. Although I am not aware of the current dynamics of your relationship with Magneto, I can easily ascertain that information. Do not be under the impression that you will be working for me, Ms. Raven. Initially, I will need information and possibly access from you. However, all consequences of your actions will rest solely with you. As the individual who assisted in your situation, I will take it upon myself to intervene if necessary. I decided to discuss this matter with Raven not only because of her connection to the club but also due to her status as a morally ambiguous figure with whom I felt at ease in a position of authority. It is interesting to note that many of the female characters in Marvel are portrayed as reliable individuals, particularly when the inconsistent dynamics introduced by the writers are not taken into account. As I mentioned to her, I had no genuine interest in assuming control of the Hellfire Club. I prefer to engage a select group of individuals I can depend on and allow them to operate independently, fostering a mutually beneficial relationship, so to speak. Additionally, I understand that Raven is actively working to shape the perception of the mutant race in a favorable manner. While this involves manipulation, I believe it is justifiable as long as it serves the greater good for all involved. She did not respond to the statements but posed a question instead. Was the young woman accompanying you during the previous experiments? Which girl are you referring to? I remarked with a smile that seemed somewhat insincere. I could also feel the slight turbulence behind me and the unmistakable eerie feeling of Wanda's aura leaking out. Raven acknowledged the situation and adeptly adjusted her phrasing. "Could you please allow me a few days to make a decision?" I acknowledged with a nod. She was not explicitly refusing, so I consider it acceptable. It's not as if she's an integral part of my plan in dealing with the club. I am concerned about the potential for such influential power to be underutilized and not applied effectively. I rose from my chair and extended my hand for a handshake, which she accepted with a neutral expression, maintaining direct eye contact as I held my smile. "I have added my contact information directly to your phone for your convenience. Rest assured, it is untraceable," I stated. "I look forward to your response, Ms. Raven." Upon exiting her office, I could sense the intense curiosity emanating from my two companions, prompting me to roll my eyes. Wanda managed to maintain confidentiality, yet Pietro displayed a complete lack of consideration for her wishes. "Are we collaborating with individuals of questionable integrity now?" he inquired. However, I declined with a shake of my head. "It's a little complicated, but everything is not always black and white." "But she's part of Magneto's people, right?" he inquired once more, but this time, rather than providing an answer, I responded with a question of my own. "You both previously collaborated with Ultron in an effort to eliminate the Avengers. Does that inherently categorize you as villains?" I am quite frustrated. "Indeed," I acknowledged. "It is indeed a challenging world we inhabit." We turned a corner when someone collided with Wanda. As she instinctively reached out to the individual, I intervened to prevent her hand from moving further and to keep her from falling using my telekinesis. The girl looked shocked and was almost about to panic but sighed in relief when she saw that the person she bumped into was fine. "I'm sorry. I was momentarily distracted, so I didn't notice you." She offered an apology, but Wanda dismissed it with a smile, all the while casting a questioning glance in my direction, as she sensed my influence momentarily guiding her actions. "She is a mutant, and a rather complex individual." I communicated with her mentally while taking a final glance at Anna-Marie, also referred to as Rogue, before proceeding on my path. "How so?" "She can't control her powers for shit, and it would have been bad for you had both of you made skin contact." I provided a brief overview of Rogue's situation to her as he entered our vehicle and departed. Subsequent to Naruto's departure, Rogue proceeded to the cafeteria, where she promptly identified her usual group, which typically included Kurt, Kitty, Scott, and Lance. As the bell rang, the cafeteria began to fill rapidly, and by the time she reached their table, she noticed a new presence that was not typically part of their group. Jean. She observed the others and noted that they all had thoughtful expressions on their faces. "What seems to be the issue?" "Jean believes there are unusual occurrences taking place within the school," Kitty remarked while nudging Jean. "It's not merely a matter of opinion, something significant occurred. I'm uncertain about the cause or the reasoning, but for over half of the previous period, there was a change in my capabilities." Jean presented her case. Lance regarded Jean's argument with a furrowed brow. "Could you please clarify your statement?" It seemed as though my senses were being muted. All the background voices that typically lingered have vanished. It's like my telepathic abilities were gone. Jean expressed her feelings with urgency, clearly affected by her experiences. "Are you still experiencing it?" Rogue asked, breaking her silence. Jean observed Rogue and subtly shook her head. "No. It started decreasing as soon as the bell rang, and I no longer feel it now." "Indeed." She was uncertain of the reason, but a sudden recollection of the trio she had encountered on her way here surfaced in her mind. However, she chose to remain silent, unsure if they had any connection to Jean's psychic episode. "It is necessary to inform the professor," Scott ultimately expressed. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching this amazing video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel for more content. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.